Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined. They're real. April 1st, 2024. It was a Monday in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Cloudy skies, a light drizzle by evening. Nothing out of the ordinary for early spring. No alarms went off when 19-year-old Sade Robinson left her shared apartment that morning. She had class, she had work, and after that, she had a dinner date. That was the plan. By midnight, Sade's phone was off. Her social media had gone silent. Her location on Snap Map stopped updating. There were no calls, no text replies, no selfies from dinner. She was simply gone. The next morning, she missed a shift at Pizza Shuttle. Not typical for her. When a coworker called her cell, it rang once and then straight to voicemail. Her roommate assumed she'd stayed over with someone. But by the following evening, her mother was calling the Milwaukee Police Department. The missing persons report was filed at 7:12 p.m. on April 2nd. What looked like a simple case of an adult choosing to vanish turned inside out the next morning. At 6:41 a.m., Tuesday, April 3rd, a walker in Warnemont Park noticed something pale at the edge of the Lake Michigan shoreline. At first, he thought it was a mannequin leg, washed in by the current. Then he saw the flesh, the bone. No foot, no shoe, just a severed human leg. The limb was turned over to the Milwaukee County Medical Examiner. Forensics began with basic observations: clean severance above the knee, minimal blood present, tissues indicated post-mortem dismemberment, a small tattoo near the ankle, cursive text, faded pink, live. By midday, ME had a match. Sade Robinson, 19 years old, missing less than 48 hours, now presumed dead, not whole. That same day, fire crews responded to a vehicle fire reported behind an industrial site off 5th and Mineral. A burned-out 2018 Honda Civic, registered to Robinson, was found gutted. VIN confirmed. Driver's seat melted down. Back seat showed a semi-preserved burn pattern, large enough to suggest a human form had once laid there. It wasn't long before surveillance teams pulled footage from a nearby convenience store. The tape showed a man walking away from the direction of the fire, wearing a hood, boarding a northbound city bus at 3:16 a.m. Investigators didn't jump to conclusions, but they noted the timing. The park where the limb was found was 10 miles east of the car fire. The physical evidence was piling up, and Sade still hadn't been found. At this point, the case was quietly upgraded from missing person to probable homicide. Who was Sade Robinson? She was a full-time student at Milwaukee Area Technical College studying culinary arts. She had just gotten her passport. She had plans to travel. Her family described her as sharp, determined, cautious. She didn't drink heavily. She didn't party with strangers. She worked. She studied. She lived with a friend off Locust Street. Digital investigators accessed her phone records and social accounts. Sade's last known communication had been a text sent at 7:45 p.m. on April 1st. It read, "Heading to Twisted Fisherman. Will keep you posted." Then silence. That restaurant, Twisted Fisherman Crab Shack, confirmed she dined with a man who paid cash. Waitstaff remembered them. He was older, black, average build, quiet. Security footage from the front lot showed the pair entering the restaurant just before 8 p.m. Cameras did not show them leaving together, but the car she arrived in was gone by 9:20 p.m. After that, Sade's trail went cold. No activity on credit cards. Phone disconnected from the network. Social media frozen. By April 4th, detectives were treating this as a targeted kill, a staged fire, a calculated disposal. But calculated didn't mean perfect. Back at the car, arson investigators noted something peculiar. The interior burn temperature had been high, accelerant-induced, but the trunk liner was untouched. That meant the fire had been set after the body, or object, had been removed. No bone fragments in the vehicle. No blood spatter. But deep within the seat seams, forensic vacuum tools extracted epithelial cells, later confirmed to be Sade's. Enough DNA to confirm she had been in that back seat. No DNA from any other individual recovered. Data analysts began scraping location metadata from Sade's last backup. Her iPhone synced automatically through iCloud. The phone stopped pinging towers at 10:53 p.m. on April 1st, 2 hours after dinner. Its last known location, near South 29th Street, just west of downtown Milwaukee. That's where the trail picked up again. There was no panicked 911 call, no screams, no signs of a fight in her apartment, just a perfect disappearance in plain sight. Sade went on a first date and never came home. The Milwaukee Homicide Unit opened a full-scale investigation under the direction of lead detective Brian Johnston. Quiet, methodical, ex-military, known for working cold cases backward, from the body to the moment of abduction. His first statement to the press was brief. "We're working this case with urgency and care. We've located one confirmed victim limb. We have probable evidence of a crime. We are asking the public, anyone who saw something unusual near Warnemont Park or knows about Sade Robinson's whereabouts after April 1st, to contact authorities." But behind closed doors, the mood was already grim. The forensic findings were too organized. The drop site was intentional. The car fire was misdirection. Whoever did this had a plan and had started executing it before Sade ever got in that vehicle. April 4th, 2024. By day 4, this wasn't a case built on hunches or vague timelines. It was becoming a layered sequence of traceable digital events, each one narrowing the last known minutes of a 19-year-old who hadn't simply disappeared. She had been removed, disposed of, dismantled. The first forensic focus was surveillance footage, not a single clip, but a pattern extracted across 5 intersections, 3 businesses, and 1 transit authority. Milwaukee PD's video analysts combed through 96 hours of footage frame by frame, identifying key timestamps across the city that aligned with the suspected timeline of the disappearance. At 7:48 p.m. on April 1st, Robinson's Honda Civic was seen entering the parking lot of Twisted Fisherman Crab Shack. A still image confirmed she was in the driver's seat. A male individual exited from the passenger side shortly after. Inside the restaurant, receipts confirmed 1 table, paid in cash, 2 crab leg platters. A camera near the bar exit showed the couple leaving together at 9:04 p.m. After that, no footage from the exterior lot. No license plate exits captured. The Civic vanished from any known camera coverage. That gap between 9:04 p.m. and 10:53 p.m., when her phone stopped pinging cell towers, was the critical window. Investigators started plotting tower triangulation data from her service provider. The pings were consistent with a northeast trajectory into Milwaukee's south side, specifically the 2900 block near South 29th Street. Cell tower triangulation wasn't perfect, but with back-end provider support, the team narrowed the final data point to a 500-meter radius, ending at 10:53 p.m. The signal terminated in a known dead zone, a small neighborhood where buildings were dense and some structures were decades old, never wired for stable signal. Inside that radius was a single residence flagged by the data team, a rental property leased to a man with no prior violent criminal record, but whose name was now circulating through private search warrants. Based solely on being the last identifiable contact with Sade Robinson, no entry was made, no knock, not yet. Parallel to digital mapping, forensic units were analyzing debris from the burned Honda Civic. An accelerant test confirmed traces of gasoline and turpentine. But the key find was in the backseat fabric. Deep thread samples pulled with forensic vacuums contained keratin protein. 2 types of hair. One matched Sade Robinson. The other was non-human, possibly pet hair, though analysis was pending. Additionally, microplastic remnants were identified, melted particles of latex and vinyl, consistent with tarp material. There were no such materials registered in the car's original interior spec. Investigators began to suspect the back seat had been lined with a tarp before the ignition, suggesting premeditation, not cleanup. If this was a panic killing, it had been followed by an organized sequence of burn, dump, and misdirection. That week, Milwaukee Transit Authority provided full bus logs and camera pulls from the Green Line operating near 5th and Mineral, the area where Sade's burned vehicle was discovered. A city bus camera, time-stamped 3:16 a.m. on April 2nd, showed a male figure boarding alone, wearing a dark hoodie and gloves, carrying no bags. He paid cash, sat near the rear, and exited 4 stops later, 5 blocks from the South 29th address. Camera resolution wasn't optimal, but analysts enhanced gait and stride data. enough to request a face-to-face with the tenant living at that residence. Still, no arrests were made. The Milwaukee PD homicide team continued gathering data silently, opting not to publicize their suspect list while confirming forensic links. As leads evolved, victimology became more critical. Sade's digital profile showed no threats, no known enemies, no signs of ongoing trauma. Her phone usage was typical: music apps, course reminders, ride-sharing records. A note she left open on her phone, never sent, read only, "Not sure I like the vibe, but it's probably nothing." It wasn't evidence, but it was tone, subtle hesitation. It gave the team enough to cross-reference other app data, including rideshare location metadata, previous search queries, and one brief web search for Twisted Fisherman safety reviews. Timestamp, 5:37 p.m., April warned. It was enough to validate that Sade had a gut feeling. She didn't act on it. She went anyway. It's a pattern that plays out in cases across the country. Homicide detectives see it too often. Early discomfort dismissed as overthinking. Young women trusting the social script not to be rude, not to be dramatic. No one blamed her, but they couldn't help but ask. If that text had been sent, if the search had gone deeper, would anything have changed? While teams expanded tower searches along the Lake Michigan shoreline, a second piece of Sade Robinson's body was recovered on April 5th, this time by a jogger near South Shore Park. Forensic examination revealed the limb, a forearm, had been removed post-mortem with a fine-toothed serrated blade. No tool marks consistent with kitchen knives. This suggested access to specific equipment, something not typically found in a domestic setting. Insect activity confirmed disposal within the last 36-48 hours. A full forensic mapping team was activated. Divers were requested by the Waukegan Police Department after a torso was located off the Illinois shoreline on April 8th. DNA confirmed a match. The radius of disposal spanned nearly 90 miles. That's when FBI behavioral analysts were looped in to review the disposal pattern. Their initial profiles suggested high control behavior, methodical partitioning, and deliberate geographical spacing to confuse jurisdiction. Their unofficial conclusion: the offender is likely local, but his awareness of interstate boundaries is not accidental. By April 6, 2024, investigators had connected enough forensic and digital markers to justify a targeted search warrant. The 500-meter cell radius near South 29th Street had only one property registered to a person who had met with Sade Robinson the night she vanished. He'd not been charged. He'd cooperated superficially, but his house had not yet been searched. That changed at 8:12 a.m. when a tactical team executed a no-knock warrant at the two-story duplex. The resident was not home. He had reportedly left for a work shift and hadn't returned calls. Officers secured the scene. What they found inside didn't require interpretation. It only needed documentation. The main floor was standard: clean, sparsely furnished, a couch, a kitchen table, unopened mail. No signs of a struggle, but the basement was different. Investigators entered the lower level and immediately noted the change in humidity and odor. The walls had been partially lined in plastic sheeting. A heavy-duty blue tarp was stretched across the far back wall, attached with industrial staples. Two folding tables stood adjacent to each other, both clean, both scarred from blade marks. One had a box of nitrile gloves and a half-empty bottle of industrial bleach. In the far corner, a portable utility sink drained into a modified sump pit. Soil samples nearby would later test positive for trace human blood proteins, not visible to the naked eye, but confirmed through luminol. A ventilation unit had been installed to exhaust air directly outside through a rear-facing window pane. A reciprocating saw was found on the workbench, wrapped in a trash bag. On-site forensic teams took no chances. Each blade, each handle, each cord end was sealed, bagged, and sent for lab testing. On the shelf nearby was a white 5-gallon bucket. Inside, latex gloves, a box cutter, rope, a large plastic drop cloth still rolled, and a pair of women's earrings. One was broken at the clasp, the other was intact. A family member of Sade would later confirm they belonged to her. A birthday gift from an aunt, last worn on April 1st. The space didn't read as a scene of panic. It read as preparation. Technical crime units photographed everything under directional lighting. They deployed alternate light sources across the plastic sheeting and detected faint contact streaks on the lower right quadrant of the wall, consistent with drag marks. The sheeting was removed and sealed. No blood pooling was present, but trace biological evidence was captured from the baseboard beneath the work area, later confirmed to be human. Downstairs in the laundry area, one garbage bag had been taped shut and stored behind the water heater. Inside, a pair of women's jeans, size 4, stained with an unidentifiable brown substance. DNA swabs matched the material to Sade Robinson, although no blood was found. The jeans had been soaked in a cleaning solution. The zipper had been forcibly torn. The basement was not a random space. It had been set up, thought through, modified for privacy and control, and someone had spent time making sure it could be wiped down quickly, but not thoroughly enough. Simultaneously, forensic techs downloaded smart home data from a disconnected Amazon Alexa speaker found in the living room. No voice recordings had been saved. However, system logs revealed several searches made between March 25 and April 1st, all timestamped to the property's network. How to dissolve body tissue fast, how long to burn human remains, how to clean blood from drywall, best blades for cutting bone. Each query was under 30 seconds in length, each followed by a browser clear command, but the system logs retain activity metadata, enough to align them with the same IP used to access the tenant's email and Netflix account. FBI digital analysts later confirmed that these search patterns were statistically rare and typically associated with criminal case studies, rarely clustered in a short window unless premeditation was present. The final forensic anomaly that day came from an unexpected source, a neighbor's security system. The duplex didn't have visible cameras, but a property across the alley did. On April 2nd at 2:13 a.m., footage showed two large black bags being loaded into the trunk of a Honda Civic in the detached garage. The figure was partially obscured by fencing, but matched the general description of the tenant. No other activity was recorded for the next hour. The car, Sade's, was confirmed via plate. Its presence in that garage prior to being found torched was the final physical connection. From that point forward, detectives stopped calling it a disappearance. Internally, the case was reclassified as homicide with forensic confirmation of body handling, digital intent, and concealment. One investigator later summarized the scene in his report. This wasn't a kill site by accident. It was outfitted for containment. The plastic, the bleach, the saw, none of that is casual. This was not spontaneous. The basement didn't answer every question, but it removed all doubt that Sade Robinson had entered that space. She had not left it alive. By April 8, 2024, the investigation had formally crossed state lines. The partial torso recovered from the shoreline in Waukegan, Illinois, matched Sade Robinson's DNA profile. It had been discovered by a local fisherman about 75 miles south of Milwaukee, along a stretch of beach typically empty that time of year. The body was wrapped in a translucent plastic sheet, cinched tightly with two industrial-grade zip ties, one at the shoulders, one at the hips. There were no clothes, no jewelry, no attempt to bury or weigh the body down. Just placement, deliberate, but not concealed. The coroner's report from Lake County identified post-mortem disarticulation consistent with mechanical tools. The edges of the cuts were clean but not surgical. Forensic anthropologists noted recurring saw patterns on each recovered segment. Those patterns matched the blades seized from the basement in Milwaukee. It wasn't a speculative link. It was technical consistency, kerf width, striation marks, and directional scoring. At this point, the FBI became directly involved. The Bureau's Behavioral Analysis Unit, BAU, flagged the case as a potential serial or organized killer scenario, not because of a known pattern of victims, but due to the level of planning and post-crime management. Interstate disposal suggested the offender understood jurisdictional delays. Dumping a torso in Illinois while the limb had surfaced in Wisconsin slowed the ability of any one county to track the full scope. But the gaps were closing. Back in Milwaukee, dive teams began searching key points along the Lake Michigan shoreline, identified through probable tide movement modeling. On April 9th, an additional piece, an upper arm, surfaced near Bayview Park. It had been in the water for days. Tissues were degraded, but not enough to eliminate a DNA match. Again, same method, same blade profile. A forensic analyst noted in the internal report, disarticulation was not random. It followed anatomical landmarks. Whoever did this had anatomical knowledge, or mimicked it from studied sources. The digital forensics unit turned its attention to activity logs from the suspect's home router. Beyond the incriminating search terms already recovered, analysts identified multiple visits to online forums discussing human decomposition, forensic timelines, and criminal evidence handling. Some of the visits had occurred weeks before Sade's disappearance. The timing mattered. This wasn't a crime of panic. It was pre-event preparation. From a prosecutorial standpoint, the sequence was gaining integrity. Body part, forensic match, tool match, internet research, timeline correlation. But more than just making a case, the investigation had to consider risk. Was there another victim? Another plan? Would more remains surface? Milwaukee PD issued an internal priority request to catalog all local missing persons within the last 6 months whose disappearances shared 3 factors. No recovered body, known online dating use, last seen contact with unknown or unverified males. The list returned 6 names. 3 cases were closed. 2 involved minors with family custody issues. 1 remained open, but with a different suspect. Still, each case was reviewed for possible overlap. None fit the timeline or forensic profile. This reaffirmed what investigators already suspected. The crime wasn't part of a wider spree. It was highly specific. It was about Sade, a singular victim, selected, stalked, and eliminated through premeditated means. From a human perspective, that mattered. It meant Sade wasn't just a name in a chain of cases. She was the case. And as more pieces surfaced, literally and figuratively, that distinction became all the more important. By April 10, 2024, the forensic evidence had outpaced the suspect's cooperation. At this point, the Milwaukee Police Department wasn't just building a murder case. They were mapping a behavioral profile. The focus turned inward, not on where the crime happened, but on who had the capability, the mindset, and the time to plan it. The man tied to the 29th Street residence had no prior convictions. But no record doesn't mean no history. A background check showed minor citations, traffic violations, a noise complaint. Nothing that flagged violent potential. But when investigators pulled past employer records and informal complaints, the image changed. In 2021, while working IT for a small logistics firm, he was formally reprimanded for inappropriate conduct. One female coworker alleged he'd followed her to her car. No charges were filed. She left the company 3 weeks later. More concerning were digital breadcrumbs from a private laptop seized at the time of the basement search. It had been encrypted, but once unlocked, it revealed several downloaded PDFs on criminal forensics, along with saved forum threads discussing how investigators track cell tower data and how long different tissues take to decompose in water. None of this was illegal, but it was deliberate. One folder, dated 2 weeks before Sade disappeared, contained a screenshot of her public Instagram profile. Another, dated 3 days before the murder, showed a Google Maps pin dropped on the Twisted Fisherman restaurant. The location wasn't saved in his phone, only in the laptop's browser history. That distinction mattered. It suggested compartmentalization, planning that avoided traceable devices. Investigators also found a draft message on the same device, never sent, addressed to an anonymous username from a dark web board. It read, "She's scheduled, should be quiet, basement is ready." This was no longer circumstantial, it was coordinated. When confronted with these findings, the suspect invoked his right to silence. He requested counsel. That was expected. What wasn't expected was the reaction from his own relatives. A family member, not previously involved, contacted authorities anonymously and disclosed that in March he'd mentioned making upgrades to his house for privacy. He never allowed visitors into the basement, not once. What struck investigators most was how long this planning had likely been in motion. Sade Robinson was the victim, but evidence now suggested she may not have been the first person he thought about targeting, just the one he followed through with. The line between pre-crime and execution wasn't just crossed, it had been prepared in layers, with patience. From a community perspective, this case rattled the perception of safety. The offender didn't stalk strangers in alleyways. He didn't pick random victims. He used dating apps, studied online behavior, and tracked patterns. And Sade, like so many others, walked into a trap disguised as normal. That's not just criminal, it's engineered predation. By April 12, 2024, the investigation reached a stage where containment was no longer viable. The volume of evidence, physical, digital, testimonial, supported an arrest warrant. Prosecutors from Milwaukee County, after reviewing the compiled case file, approved charges: first-degree intentional homicide, mutilation of a corpse, and obstruction of justice. The warrant was signed by 3:22 p.m. Execution began less than 90 minutes later. The suspect was taken into custody at a workplace parking structure. No resistance, no statement. He asked if he needed a lawyer before a word was spoken to him. The arrest was quiet, clinical, but behind it was the weight of an entire city watching. Inside the station, he declined formal questioning. No confession was offered. He was processed, fingerprinted, and placed in holding. The search of his personal vehicle revealed a burner phone with no contacts, but active usage within the last 10 days. An attempt, investigators suspected, to disconnect his actions from his known devices. Still, the geolocation data from that phone synced within blocks of the body recovery sites. That link was now part of discovery. Outside, the media had already taken hold. News vans lined up along State Street. The community, already grieving Sade's death, now saw a face attached to the case. The public outcry wasn't just about the crime, it was about the silence, the calculated nature, the ordinary appearance of someone who had, for all intents and purposes, lived unnoticed. Back in the lab, forensic teams finalized trace evidence from the home. Fibers pulled from the plastic wrap around the torso matched fibers found in a storage bin inside the suspect's basement. Tiny synthetic strands, beige, high density, typically used in industrial drop cloths. The color, weave, and composition were indistinguishable under microscopy. That removed all remaining doubt about the location of the dismemberment. The chain of events now had structural integrity. Sade left her home on April 1st. She met a man at a known restaurant. She was not seen again. Her car was found burned. Her body parts appeared over the next 10 days. Each fragment of tissue carried forensic consistency: saw pattern, wrap type, decomposition stage. What closed the loop wasn't a confession, it was convergence. The case didn't rely on a single piece of evidence. It stood because dozens of small, exacting elements, DNA, fiber, timestamps, location pings, search history, photographic matches, had stacked in precision. And when that kind of convergence happens, defense becomes mechanical. Strategy, not truth. Prosecutors prepared their motion for no bail. The court agreed. The suspect was remanded pending trial. But outside the courtroom, questions began to emerge. Why weren't earlier red flags taken more seriously? Why did informal complaints years ago disappear into HR reports? Why was someone with a documented history of disturbing online behavior allowed to live next to families, kids, and women who didn't know they were being observed? These weren't legal questions, they were community ones. And Sade Robinson's name was no longer just in a case file, it was etched into a broader conversation about warning signs, about digital predation, about how trust and normalcy are often used as camouflage. She wasn't targeted randomly, she was researched, picked, and pursued. Understanding that mattered, not just for justice, but for prevention. April 2024. The arrest had been made. The charges were public. But inside the Milwaukee County Courthouse, the process was just beginning. What came next wasn't dramatic. It was deliberate. The pretrial hearing took place under heavy media attention. 3 cameras were approved for the hallway only, none inside. The suspect entered in a county-issued jumpsuit, silent, eyes down. Defense counsel filed a routine plea of not guilty. No elaboration, no statement. The prosecution presented a list of physical evidence to be formally entered into record. DNA matches from bone, clothing, and basement surfaces. Fiber trace comparisons linking recovered body wrap to storage bins. Time-stamped device logs, tracking premeditation surveillance footage of vehicle activity and disposal route. Smart home and browser data, unaltered and date verified. No single piece told the story. Together, they formed a network of decisions, each one traceable, recoverable, impossible to dismiss. Defense counsel moved to suppress several digital elements, citing potential Fourth Amendment violations. That motion was denied. A court-appointed forensic analyst confirmed all extractions were performed under valid warrants. But it wasn't the evidence that shifted the courtroom that day. It was the people. Sade Robinson's mother addressed the court. Her voice was clear, controlled. She spoke for just over 2 minutes. She described the last time she heard her daughter's voice, the final text, the unanswered call. She didn't ask for vengeance. She asked for a full record, one that would not be sanitized or minimized. In criminal court, emotion doesn't weigh the scale, but it fills the room, and it changes how the process is witnessed. Outside, community organizers had begun laying flowers near the base of the courthouse steps. Most wore pink, Sade's favorite color. One sign read, "We raise our daughters to be careful. Who will teach the predators to stop?" Inside, the court scheduled a formal trial date. No bail, no delays. Discovery was ordered to continue. The judge reminded both sides that public exposure would not alter legal process, but acknowledged that public trust was already fractured. Behind that, there was a quieter reality. Forensic work was still ongoing. Microscopic soil analysis from the suspect's basement drain had revealed particles unique to shoreline locations miles apart. A final match would be submitted in days, not speculation, just confirmation. What was building now wasn't just a case, it was precedent for how digital planning, physical precision, and victim targeting were evolving in real time, and how justice systems would need to adapt. Because this wasn't about a single night. It was about a pattern designed to look like nothing at all, until it was too late. By late April 2025, over a year had passed since 19-year-old Sade Robinson vanished after a first date that ended in silence, surveillance footage, and ultimately a series of forensic discoveries that shocked Milwaukee. Yet despite the arrest, the charges, and the sealed chain of evidence, the case remains legally unfinished. The man accused, Maxwell Anderson, has not yet stood trial. The official verdict is still pending. But inside the courtroom, groundwork has already been laid. During preliminary hearings, the prosecution entered a comprehensive evidentiary package. Trace DNA from clothing and bone, matching saw striation analysis, GPS movement logs, and digital behavior extracted under federal cybercrime protocol. Each point was admissible. None was challenged successfully. The defense has relied on procedural strategy. Requests to suppress surveillance footage were denied. Attempts to exclude digital search history were overruled. The court ruled that all investigatory steps followed the warrant process and did not violate constitutional protections. No plea deal has been offered or accepted. Trial preparation continues. As of May 2025, Anderson remains in pretrial detention without bond. His public defenders have not commented to media, and no motions for mental health evaluation have been filed. From a legal standpoint, the machinery is turning, slowly, deliberately, but not without tension. Beyond the courtroom, the weight of the case continues to echo. In Milwaukee, Sade Robinson's name now appears in multiple city-led safety initiatives. MAC, the college where she studied, introduced a mandatory digital dating awareness module for all first-year students. It wasn't reactionary, it was overdue. Community advocacy groups have cited the case as a tipping point, a violent reminder of how normalization can disguise predatory intent. Sade didn't ignore her instincts. She wasn't reckless. She followed a social protocol that countless others do. Respond politely, meet in public, keep the phone on. And still, that wasn't enough. This isn't about victim behavior. It never should have been. The lesson wasn't how to avoid harm. The lesson was how calculated harm is often cloaked in casual opportunity. Anderson didn't hunt in alleys. He used digital tools, public venues, and private preparation to carry out what law enforcement now categorizes as single victim targeted homicide with logistical compartmentalization, a term that only exists because traditional language can't quite fit what modern crime has become. Forensic teams, digital analysts, and behavioral psychologists all agree. This case represents a future-facing challenge. Crimes committed through a mix of physical brutality and online premeditation. Killers who research how to manipulate jurisdictional gaps. Offenders who compartmentalize life, devices, and data trails so precisely that catching them relies not on luck, but on unbroken coordination across agencies. At the heart of this case isn't a killer. It's a young woman whose absence uncovered everything. Sade Robinson's remains were found in pieces, but the story told through those fragments was complete. Each cut, each fiber, each timestamp built a forensic language that spoke for her when she could not. And in that silence, investigators built a narrative so dense with truth that no cross-examination has yet dislodged it. Her family continues to wait. They have not staged protests or demanded televised justice. They have asked for one thing only, that the full truth remain visible, and that her name not become a headline buried under the next tragedy. As the legal process unfolds, the broader impact of her case has already taken hold. Institutions are adjusting, lawmakers are listening, social discourse is shifting from "why didn't she avoid this?" to "why did he believe he could get away with it?" That shift is small, but it's real. Justice is not always about the final gavel. It's about the accumulation of truth, the refusal to look away, and the systems that evolve because someone didn't survive. This case doesn't have a cinematic ending. No surprise confession, no sudden twist. Just layers of verification, built piece by piece, like the evidence they recovered. And while the court may still be deliberating, the world outside has already been warned. Sade Robinson's story is not finished, but it has already changed something. Some stories don't end with a verdict. They end with awareness. And if you've followed this case to the end, maybe you're asking the same thing I did. How does something like this happen in a world full of red flags no one wants to see? If you're someone dating, parenting, or just trying to stay alert in a digital world, remember this. Trust your instincts, speak up, share your location, and never assume safety just because someone seems normal. Sade did everything right, and still, it wasn't enough. That's not her fault. That's our warning. If this video meant something to you, let me know where you're watching from, or tell me how this case made you feel. If you didn't like it, I'd still love to hear why. We're building this channel around truth, not perfection. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story hit you in the heart, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next.